Okay, stand by, everyone.
I'm ready to go.
Camera's rolling.
Action. Action.
Camera's rolling. Action. That looked good. 40 millimeter.
Test, test, test.
Action. That looked good.
Test, test, test.
Camera's rolling.
Action.
Okay, that's a cut. Action.
Okay, that's a cut. Action.
It could be a neat shot. Okay.
Until we get it clear.
Really beautiful. Well, let's do it again. Go ahead. Okay, tail slate. That was nice. I've always loved to make films about flying because when you take the camera into the air, you give the audience who are sitting in the theater a treat that they're not able to accomplish generally. Well, The Magic of Flight, we really wanted to work as a film that gave them the sensation of piloting a jet aircraft. How can it be different? Well, there's one thing that we've not done and no one else has, and that's put a big camera in places that are really rare on an airplane. Behind the cockpit, underneath, looking forward, backwards, and sideways, in front of the pilot, back behind the pilot, inside the cockpit. That was more or less my mantra for the film. If we got the mounts built right so that they really worked, and we were able to shoot with them over a number of days, so I got the right light, the right shots, the right aircraft performance, we were going to end up with a film that was truly different and exceptional.
IMAX camera had been put on some large airplanes before, but not in the kind of spots that we wanted to put them. So we really had to reinvent the wheel as far as mounting goes.
Okay, and what about this circuit right here? How does that interface with the aircraft?
We had to design and build mounts with the help of the Navy and with the help of McDonnell Douglas, who built the aircraft, to go on the airplane in 6 different positions and gave us 6 different views. That job required us almost a year of work and almost $1 million of effort.
So the key to the magic of flight was getting mounts built and getting those cameras on the airplane to give a really unique point of view. I mean, there's been a lot of rig shots done, camera mount shots done on airplanes, but not in IMAX like that.
The Mark II IMAX camera was what we had chosen to mount onto the Blue Angels FA-18 aircraft because it's a very reliable and rugged camera. The mounts were very highly engineered in order to put this camera, which altogether weighs around 85 pounds, to put this onto an aircraft that's going to be going 500–600 miles an hour. So the mounts that were built for this particular camera were very beefy and required a great deal of work to take on and off of the plane.
There were times where I thought that we weren't going to get the mounts ready, that my whole goal of giving the audience a sensation of being on a jet fighter was not going to come about. It was that tough to make those mounts work.
When we put the mounts on the airplanes, we were all quite nervous. Not just the first time, every time. whenever they'd come back, the first thing we'd do is look to see if the mount was still on the airplane while they were on their final approach. And so that was the first thing, is the mount still on? And then the second thing was, did the camera run?
To take the mount on and off of the aircraft to reload the camera after 90 seconds worth of filming, we had to get a forklift out, went underneath the camera.
Clear, clear, clear. That's right.
Pulled the mount off underneath the airplane.
Everything has to be safety wired. There were 64 half-inch bolts holding just the bottom plate of our camera mount on. So we had to snip all the wires, pull all of the bolts out.
We opened the whole thing up, reloaded the camera, put the thing back together into the mount. Took it on the forklift back to the airplane and remounted the camera. It could take over an hour. You aren't shooting very many rolls of film every day at that rate.
This one mount that mounted back behind the cockpit looking forward was the toughest mount because it was right in the slipstream and created the most turbulence. The Blue Angels did their briefing in the morning and then rolled out, took off, and I wanted it to be on the slot aircraft. What they were supposed to do is the fourth aircraft was supposed to get behind, and then they were going to go into a loop. They did the loop, and instantly I knew something was wrong because all of a sudden I heard over the radio that number 4 aircraft was coming back in. He came back in, jumped out of that airplane and jumped into another airplane and took off. I went, oh no, we're in trouble. What has gone wrong here? What went wrong was that the mount started vibrating like this as he took it into his position back behind the other 3. And he fully thought that the mount was going to rip itself off and cause some damage to the aircraft and could have gotten into the rear stabilizer or one of the control panels, and he could have crashed. He landed safely. Thankfully, we didn't have any accidents with any of the mounts. You know, we were right there at the edge, trying to push the envelope further in terms of photography. And the Blue Angels were right there with us, trying to push their performance together as a team and get shots of it at the same time.
It takes a practiced hand to stitch up the sky with a needle moving this fast.
Little flats and deeps? Yeah. 3's rock solid. Okay. I got a little mismatch on that star, too. 5 on star. 5
Besides the spectacular images from the air and the kind of sensation that we wanted to give the audience, the real story of the film was the kind of training and repetition that's required to pilot a jet aircraft today.
We start out with very basic things, turning the smoke on and off at the same time. And then we build on that, and just every day we try to do everything exactly the same.
I mean, their lives depend on being ultra precise, that they start out being very imprecise, that they make mistakes just like everyone else, but through repetition and practice and hard work, they're able to refine their maneuvers and their routine to the point where it's perfect every time, and it has to be perfect every time.
The training sequence of the Blue Angels in the desert was one of the most important scenes in the film because that was establishing the Blue Angels as characters and as a team.
Probably 5 times out of 100 we do it the way we want to do it.
We had gone down there and introduced them to our camera mounts, which was a somewhat traumatic experience for them when they saw the mounts that we wanted them to fly. But they were real great, you know. They understand. You know, filmmaking operates sort of like the military does.
Taking high-performance jets to the edge requires precision. That's why during desert training, the Blue Angels fly 2 hops a day, 6 days a week.
I've got this guy, Jeff Mart, who is, in my estimation, the best Steadicam operator in the world. And he has a specialty in being able to ride a bicycle along with the characters and get a flawlessly smooth shot as he dollies around. And so we put him on the bicycle and these 2 Blue Angels jogging. Ended up filming the shot probably about 18 or 19 times until I really thought that it was right in terms of lighting and camera shadow and all the various things that went on.
It's kind of a wonderful shot, and most people, of course, will never think, gee, was this cameraman on a bicycle? But in fact, that's how the shot was done.
And the Blue Angel guys were absolutely cooperative. You know, they were having a good time acting as stars of the show. They thought it was pretty hilarious, all the things that I had them do. These guys did go jogging every day, but they said that that day they did more jogging than they'd ever done in their lives.
But it takes years of training before we can acquire that feel for the sky. Years before a pilot can fly as if the plane were a second skin.
Each one of the shots that you see in The Magic of Flight that was photographed on the aircraft probably took 3 weeks to perform. You know, there was one time that I got to ride with the Blue Angels, and that was a real treat. I sat in the back seat, and we were up in the air for over an hour, 6 Blue Angels jets through an entire air show. I found out what the aviator's body goes through when they do those kinds of high-level, high-G performance maneuvers. And it's amazing. It really feels like your body is being stretched and pulled in ways that you've never experienced before. It's probably one of the most intense things that I've ever done in my life.
You know, when we went down to Pensacola and toured the base to see what the filming opportunities were, you know, one of the things that jumped out at us was this crazy centrifuge that they have.
Pilots also train in a spin simulator, a centrifuge referred to by some as the swirling, hurling torture.
I'd be more worried about these 2. The red man one for a second. Okay.
The centrifuge shot was very easy to set up because the Blue Angels actually train on these machines. It was just a matter of finding a willing participant because they hate this machine. It makes you sick in some cases.
Slate.
Marker.
Have you done the centrifugal testing
Yes.
and such before?
It is one of the most painful memories of my life because you're inside of a machine that is going to just put heavy G-forces on your body.
Well, the centrifuge training for the Blue Angels is experiential. It's one of those IMAX moments where the point of view shot is really the key thing. Setting it up and then putting the audience in the centrifuge so that they find themselves whirling around at a great speed.
Are you ready in the control room?
Yeah. Camera's rolling. 10 RPMs on this. We had a real difficulty when we were editing that sequence because in a large format film, if you take it too far, your audience is going to throw up. Obviously, you want to take it far enough so that it's thrilling, but not so far that they're going to get upset.
This is the kind of scene that in IMAX you might have to look away because it could get you kind of woozy. And we played up the humorous aspect of this. We took kind of a bluegrass thing, and you can see this thing begins to go faster and faster. And we did the same thing with the music. We started off with kind of a laid-back country feel and just got faster and faster until, you know, the frenetic pace is accentuated. I mean, that's silly. Look at that thing.
Remember, a movement of only 1/8 of an inch can be the difference between flight and free fall.
Flat spin is one of the most dangerous and critical situations that a pilot can get into, and there are, more often than not, you're unable to recover from it.
Now, an aircraft will go into a flat spin occasionally, and jet aircraft pilots have to train for that kind of disaster. And a flat spin is where the aircraft exceeds its limitations and stops flying and becomes a falling object.
The first thing that happens is what's called gray out, where you start losing your color vision. Then you experience what's called tunnel vision, and your periphery will start to close in, and the things on the edge will become black, and it starts closing in until basically you're looking through a soda straw.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to put the camera, the big IMAX camera, in a cockpit and take a full aircraft into an out-of-control spin because it'd just be way, way too dangerous. We built this cockpit on a turntable, put vibration in it, and I think it's fairly effective. It does give the audience the sensation of what a pilot goes through during this training procedure.
We were able to, with lights and reflectors, create a sense that this thing was actually spinning around at a pretty high rate of speed.
So you'll notice, for instance, in a shot like this, you'll see shadow moving across him, and that's how that's done. You see the shadow moving across his face. That's what gives you the sensation, as the sun spins behind his head, gives you the sensation that this really is a plane in a spin, when in fact it's a guy who's safely on the ground.
The pilot that we had was terrific. He really did a great job for us in simulating what he would be going through during a flat spin recovery, and it's an exciting sequence.
Recovered? Roger that. Heading home.
In the late 1800s, Otto Lilienthal of Germany flew the world's first successful hang glider, but it suffered from a control problem that would cost him his life. It was Wilbur and Orville Wright, two bicycle makers from Dayton, Ohio, who took a new approach to the problem.
In the case of the Wright brothers, there wasn't really archival footage of their famous flight or any of the time leading up to that. But the human story there was something that everyone could identify with in some way or another.
One of the fellows who was there that morning described how the two of them, Orville and Wilbur, sort of walked off by themselves as they were getting ready to go and talked to one another and shook hands just privately, the two of them.
You're actually feeling through the story of Tom Crouch and his words that you're jumping back in time to 1903 when the Wright brothers took off for the first time. Then you can do your descriptions.
With the IMAX camera, can I move a little bit toward it that way or not? Okay.
It'll roll out of focus a bit.
All right.
As that happens.
And you turn it on its side to make it an elevator, and it controls pitch. It wasn't too difficult.
Using the lenses that we use in the IMAX camera, in order to be able to make some sort of a move, to zoom in, to pan across, you needed a photograph that was large enough so that you wouldn't pan off and to create some interest rather than just looking at a static still photograph.
Everything is on a large scale. We couldn't just photograph prints of it that were 8 by 10 or 11 by 14. We had to make posters that were 10 by 15 feet.
Orville was chosen to pilot this flight. After he climbed in, they turned over the propellers, and off she went.
Okay, so we're basically trying to accentuate the feeling that might have taken place the day the Wright brothers finally had success. And so we have this nice, beautiful, large orchestral horns. There's a feeling of victory that's growing here.
We're capable of sustained flight. So that was the first day, December 17th, 1903, 4 flights.
This is actual photos taken from the seating area on the Kitty Hawk. Now we're going to lift off. Now we get our IMAX moment where it goes to full color and we're actually flying and maybe getting a little of the feeling that the Wright brothers might have achieved that day.
Planes rely on forward motion for lift, while birds, who can direct thrust downward, can land on a dime.
The Harrier sequence is something that's pretty exciting because people don't see a Harrier aircraft here in America very often.
Directable engine thrust allows the Harrier to take off and land like a bird.
We had a nose mount in a Learjet, and we were able to follow the Harrier with this Learjet.
One of the highlights on the shoot for me was being able to be in a Learjet. And I was flying in formation with 2 other Harrier jets. And we were basically wingtip to wingtip, flying in formation, flying through valleys and flying over hills. It was quite remarkable, but the best of the whole thing was we decided to do a barrel roll. And so what we basically did, we did a barrel roll in a Learjet following 2 Harriers, and basically you just see the whole world just spin around.
You know, the neat thing about Harriers is they're almost like helicopters. We got a real neat shot of the Harrier just taking off.
Harriers can even hover. About the only thing they can't do is flap their wings.
But you do have to be careful when a Harrier goes vertical and then he rotates his engines to fly straight forward. You don't want to be behind him when he does that because they kick out a heck of a lot of thrust. Probably would have knocked that helicopter right out of the sky.
In the 100 years since the Wright brothers first took to the air, we have become like the birds.
As you're doing your research for your film, you look for those kinds of images that can only be experienced on the big screen. And you build sequences around those truly exceptional images. And that's what I do when I design a film. And having a million birds in one shot was one of those classic images that I wanted to bring across.
All the wings flapping, all the white and all the black is a dizzying kind of shot, but it's a shot that just really works. It's such a beautiful shot. That took quite a while to get. Birds don't do what you want them to. They can never say, okay, you know, action, and the birds will take off.
To photograph them is a real challenge. The wardens who control that region are very, very careful about human interaction with those birds. They don't want to spook the birds. They don't want to make the birds change their behavior in any way. They don't want you to get close to the birds. And so photographically, we were under a lot of limitations. But we were able to camouflage the camera at times, move the camera on dollies and into position without, very quietly, without disturbing the birds. Okay, Rob, come up to us.
Now move super slowly, the same direction that you're going now, but you're going to be down here next to the culvert, and we'll go with a 500mm lens. Everyone be really quiet though. Try to make it so that they don't see you move.
You know, there's some cursing going on inside that vehicle right now.
We'd back up the truck early in the morning and get there before the sun even started coming up, and we'd camouflage the camera and just basically wait for the birds to take off. You try to stay in the cover and not out in the open, because once the birds saw you, they would fly away.
I don't know how many times we were out there all set up, ready to go, gone through all of our, secret maneuvers and hiding behind camouflage nets and everything else.
There's about 3 to 5 coyotes out there.
It's all set to go. The birds take off because some coyote jumped into the mist.
We've got a lot of good video of the truck being inundated by birds.
Well, when the birds took off, the coyotes would just sit at the edge and open their mouths, and the birds would fly right into their mouths because there's so many birds, I guess they can't see where they're going.
You're thinking, why me? You're sitting in the back of the truck, the camera truck, and all you hear is pap, 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 pap on the top of the vehicle. Well, they're not throwing you kisses, that's for sure. That's the only time I've ever asked myself, why me? Why am I here underneath all these snow geese, just getting pounded and pounded?
At times, we actually set up the camera in pre-dawn situations while it was dark and really cold.
To get this particular shot that we're looking at now was probably the coldest day in my life. We were trying to get shots of birds taking off, coming over the camera, which was very, very difficult to get. So we were never more than 3 feet away from the camera, standing by the camera, waiting for some kind of action.
It's cold out here. I'd like to talk to you, but we can't talk to you. It's just before sunrise. There's the birds everywhere. 6:40. We got up at 4 o'clock to get here.
I remember shooting there days upon days upon days and getting good shots, and then one day we just got this marvelous shot. It was a day where there was no wind, the lake was absolutely glassy, the sunrise was gorgeous, and the birds came right on time. And it's just one of those moments where you've practiced and practiced and got everything right technically, and hope that it all happens, and finally all the conditions come together.
Birds have the advantage of strong, hollow-boned wings, which flex and change shape to meet all the demands of getting into the air.
One of the difficult things about trying to teach people something in a large format film is that you do have limited time.
Once aloft, the wing's natural shape allows a bird to soar.
Greg came up with the idea that we would start with a bird's wing.
And in this instance, we used computer animation to try to give them the sense of what the bird was like when it takes off, flaps its wings, and why its wings are shaped the way that they are, and then how an aircraft takes off, how we've learned through the shape of a bird's wing to use airfoil.
Okay, so we have a little bit of an elegant piano thing going on in the background, giving us this sort of dancing, flying feeling, but then we've added in our sort of country aspects with the guitar. It gives us our Western feel. But this is a pretty dry scene with a lot of talking about science, so it's just really background kind of music. Then we're going to move into a section here where it's going to lift into a little bit, a larger scene where you can hear our string section coming in and playing nice big pads underneath it to give it a warmer feeling. But still, there's this elegance. Now, there's sort of a dance time, you know, with the biplane. Now a little cavalcade of time, still maintaining the waltz. And finally, we're going to end the scene with this jet, and it's going to cut quickly to the Blue Angels. Boom.
No one has to be more precise than the pilots who take off and land on the movable airports we call aircraft carriers.
The United States Navy has a very specific mission, and it's not to make movies. And we were not in a position to rent the United States Navy and pay all those costs.
You guys are fine. What they're talking about is people need to be in uniform. Well, I'm getting a lot of breakup on this video camera from the radar.
When you're filming on board an aircraft carrier, you have to know that you're in the most dangerous situation that you'll probably ever be in your life. The area of a carrier deck is known to be the most dangerous half-acre on the planet.
The most dangerous place to be in the world. You've got jets all over the aircraft. We have 85 jets on this carrier. You can get blown overboard by jet blast. You can get hit by a plane.
Complicating the matter is the fact that you can't hear anything. And you're wearing these ear protectors, you don't hear a thing. You don't know when an aircraft is moving towards you.
Loud noise contributes to the inability to think properly, you know, so you really had to stop and figure out what it was you were trying to do, and then try to figure out how to communicate that to the person you're working with.
Our carrier deck team, which I think was 6 people,
What they did with us the last time we did this was...
each one of the members of those 6 people had one spotter.
We had someone escorting us all around the flight deck, but a number of times where I'd feel a pair of hands on my shoulders and I'd get driven to the deck just seconds before an F-18 wing had come right through the space my head had occupied a few minutes before. Because you get involved in what you're doing, you're setting the camera up. So we were happy to have our babysitters out there keeping us honest.
The second he feels the deck beneath him, Scott hits the throttle so he can take off again if his hook doesn't catch the arresting cable.
Taking off and landing on a carrier is, any pilot will tell you, probably the most difficult thing you can do. I wanted to give that impression to the audience, what it's like to land on a teeny thing that looks like a postage stamp, and it's bobbing around on the ocean. It's not stationary like a normal airport. It's this little teeny thing that you've got to know how to land on perfectly.
And here we are on the flight deck again as an F-18 Hornet comes in for a successful trap. As you can see, the tail hook is down.
The airplanes are slamming into the deck. I mean, slamming in. My airplane would fall apart if I tried to land like that. And it just goes to show you how tough those airplanes are. And it also, you understand all the scurrying that goes on. It's a finely choreographed ballet that all these people are doing to move these airplanes on that aircraft carrier.
My favorite shot of that aircraft carrier sequence was a shot we did from the centerline mount looking forward. We had told the pilot to turn the camera on as he was approaching the catapult.
I wouldn't do a taxi shot until down in here in terms of priority.
Well, he turned it on considerably earlier than that. And so we got a lot more out of that particular shot than we ever expected. And it's a really unique angle. It really gives you a completely different look of what the flight deck is like.
So I did get to do one catapult off the aircraft carrier. I mean, no roller coaster in the world can match that, which was a very, very, very big rush. If you've never done it before, it is 0 to 160 in like 2 seconds or something like that.
For the magic of flight, Greg had shot a whole bunch of birds, some really spectacular shots. And it occurred to me that we could intercut the birds with the airplanes, and as I'm doing here. In this case, it's birds landing with airplanes landing on the aircraft carrier. I just got a sort of visual connection and tried it, and we ended up using it in the finished movie.
When we left the carrier, after being there for 3 weeks, it was pretty emotional. We didn't want to leave. It had become home.
Sean Tucker plays to the crowd with his son, who narrates his show.
For the last 26 years, I've been involved in this art form we call airshow flying.
Here's my dad, turning around and around until airspeed comes to 0, building up speeds up to 100 miles an hour backwards. This is my dad's version of the incredible Mr. Charlie Hillard torque roll.
It's about sharing dreams, it's about inspiring people, it's about showing people that they can excel. And this is what this movie is all about, in the magic of flight. And to be able to express myself on the big screen, which is in the IMAX theaters, is a huge honor, but also it was very important to me because I expressed myself on this big screen called the sky. I gotta feel that sky.
Slate. Marker. Well, when I was 10 years old, I told my parents that I wanted to be an airline pilot. And they patted me on the back and smiled and said, "Patty, girls don't become pilots."
Patty became the first woman to win the National Aerobatic Championship.
One of the finest flyers in the world. In fact, many people would say that she is the finest flyer.
I think aviation's a wonderful career for women, but at the same time, I know that as a woman, I'm under a lot more scrutiny than the men are. So that's the way I look at it. That little extra challenge just makes me a better pilot.
And the fact that she is a woman is just something that goes along with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have got a magnificent show for you today. And we have plenty of seating room for you. We still have plenty of room for you in the bleachers.
We used the air show as the ending to the film because it's more or less when all of it comes together for the Blue Angels. They're always thinking, well, we could be a little bit better. But every month or two, they have one of those shows that just is so good that they can say, we were almost there. We were almost perfect. And that's what we try to get across with that final air show is that hunt for perfection and the idea that occasionally that they get pretty close.
But, you know, you'd be kidding around with them, and then they would, you know, march out on the field and get in those airplanes and take off and start performing the routine. And I could never quite make the leap that, you know, these 6 guys who I knew as individuals were actually up there flying those airplanes.
So we watch a pilot doing this straight-up vertical climb where he really has to fight the G-force, and I think that the audience is in there grunting with him right along.
Where else can you do a 9G straight pull-up with a 360 spin out at the top and really feel it? With this film, having the mount on the bottom of the jet, you actually get to feel what the pilots are feeling. You know, you sit there and your stomach drops.
The shots that we did with the Blue Angels in The Magic of Flight were unprecedented in the large format. The way we were able to intercut the shots from the mounts to shots of the pilot's face and experience the emotion of what he was going through. In the large format, no one's ever been able to get that sort of sense of flying, not only the physical and visceral sense of it, but also the emotional sense of it.
It's got the thrills of very, very high performance, fast flight. It's got the beauty of birds in flight at dawn over beautiful natural settings. It's got the humanity and the kind of emotion of these characters who are trying to do their best and striving so hard. And it's got a little bit of humor. It kind of takes the edge off the seriousness of what they're doing. The music is beautiful, it's nicely edited, but the subjects are so good that they shine through.
The most special moment of my involvement with this project is standing around the tarmac with the Blue Angels talking about dreams, talking about different ways to fly airplanes. My biplane flies a lot different than an F-18 jet, but we have all one thing in common, and that's to fly.
Each pilot has acquired a distinct feel for the air, but together, like the fingers of a skilled magician's hand, they fly as one.